Welcome back to the Grease Goblins Rereads channel. Today, we're going to be doing Tyrion 6, A Clash of Kings. I feel like I say this with every single Tyrion chapter. They're all just so good. Each one has their own different thing that I think makes it special. This one, we're just going to get Tyrion kind of having his own like Ned Stark chapter in the past book where Ned Stark was on the throne, making his own decisions, doing his own rulings. We see a little bit of that. We see Tyrion and Cersei's dynamic in this chapter. Again, just exploring that idea of just kind of exploring that relationship. And it's so weird because in this chapter, we actually see Cersei and Tyrion get along quite well. And even in that aspect of it, when they get along well, it's Tyrion using the situation to poison his own sister. It just tells you how screwed up the relationship is. And a lot of that's due to how Cersei treats Tyrion. But that's kind of a lot of what we see in this chapter is Tyrion dealing and politically maneuvering around Cersei, given the information that they've just learned that Stannis is actually not going to King's Landing at all. He's going to fight his brother. He's going to siege Storm's End, which is really good news for the Lannisters, albeit I don't think it's as good as maybe they take it, or at least Cersei takes it. The scene begins with soft harp music and thrilling pipes accompanied by a muffled song. But what's interesting about this song is Tyrion recognizes it as a song about lost love. And that's what Tyrion's whole plotline has been about, going back to the first book and now this book, is how Tyrion is looking for love. He's looking for appreciation and respect and all the things that any normal human being wants, and he hasn't been able to find that. And the one time that he actually did have that with Tysha, he believes that that was actually a lie, that that was all, a paid thing and that wasn't actually love. So that's what George kind of subtly puts into this chapter to foreshadow with Tyrion. Sir Meryn Trant guards the Queen's door, greeting Tyrion grudgingly, but allows him to enter. The music stops abruptly as Tyrion steps into Cersei's chamber. Now, Tyrion gives a really weird description of his sister because if you go to any POV, you don't really see the person describing their sister as very beautiful and attractive and all these things and looking at them almost like you're like sizing up somebody that you have a crush on or something. It's just really weird. And I think it's interesting the way that this chapter is kind of placed after we saw Theon and his dynamic with his sister Asha in the last one. I almost feel like that wasn't just something that's a coincidence. I always feel like George leaves little Easter eggs in where he places chapters. And so when we get this, right, where Tyrion, he comes in and, he sees his sister and she's reclining on a pile of cushions and Tyrion's noting her feet are bare. And that's something that's a point of emphasis for some reason for Tyrion. And he notes her golden hair and she wears a green and gold samite robe that shimmers in the candlelight. And Tyrion just kind of comes off as really weird, right? And again, I've talked about this in this book specifically, and it gets worse as the series goes on, is Tyrion definitely has a thing for his sister, and it's just really weird, especially given the fact that his own brother Jaime has been sleeping with Cersei. In a lot of ways, Tyrion feels jealous towards Jaime in that regard, right? So it's just so weird the way that that's kind of done, and that's just another point of that being brought up here. As Tyrion greets her, he turns to Sir Lancel Lannister, who has been singing and offers a remark that makes Lancel a bit sulky. Lancel has grown taller, with thick sandy hair, green Lannister eyes, and a faint mustache. Now, something that I think Alt-Shift X pointed out really well in his video about the real Tyrion Lannister, something that I didn't really pick up on the first couple rereads, is the way Tyrion treats Lancel is definitely a reflection of himself. Lancel is everything Tyrion kind of wishes he could have been at one point, right? Growing tall, being, handsome. He's somebody that women would like. Tyrion is not those things at all. Tyrion is shorter. He's described as being ugly. People don't take him seriously. All these different things. And so that's a lot of the reasons why he treats Lancel the way he does. And it's not helped because Lancel is somebody that's very, arrogant at this point. He's a very young man and he's just been knighted and all these things. And again, we have somebody else in the Lannister family going after Cersei, so there's that as well. At 16, he exudes youthful arrogance devoid of humor or self-doubt. His recent knighthood has reinforced his sense of entitlement. And Lancel questions whether Cersei had actually summoned Tyrion, to which Tyrion casually responds that she did not. Now, this is what's interesting, right? Lancel doesn't set himself up well because Tyrion is the hand of the king. Tyrion's power is miles larger than Lancel's, but because Lancel is so close to Cersei, he believes that he can just walk over people That's another reason as to why Tyrion treats Lancel the way he's going to in future chapters. Tyrion casually responds that she did not. He states he has important matters to discuss with Cersei, implicitly dismissing Lancel's presence. Lancel is irrelevant to Tyrion. Tyrion has all these men, he has the power in this situation. He's just going to just disregard Lancel as a whole. And that gets us into page 300. Cersei regards Tyrion with suspicion and preemptively dismisses any criticism about her handling of the Begging Brothers. Cersei believes that he's coming here to talk about, stuff that she did. That's not the case at all. Tyrion is trying to break the news about Renly and Stannis while also trying to then poison her so that he can enact some acts while she's out of duty. She refuses to allow them to spread what she sees as treasonous talk and orders them to be imprisoned in the dungeons. Think about what we talked about at the very beginning of the Clash of Kings, journey for Tyrion. There's this rumor, this idea that Ned has basically put out, that Stannis has kind of run with, right? Is that Cersei slept with Jaime, had all these kids, all that stuff. And the one thing that Tyrion preaches is we shouldn't silence people, because then that's going to give even more validity to those claims, right? Because why are we silencing them if those claims are not true? It's kind of the same idea here, except Cersei doesn't really go along with that. She just completely doesn't let people talk about her and any of these other regards. And it's just going to reinforce why the public is swaying against them, why they start to have a riot, as we'll see later on. Lancel adds that he would have had their tongues cut out. Again, it would have made it even worse, right? Now you're not only imprisoning them, but you're then also killing them because they're giving free speech, right? Now, there is no free speech in this point of time, but it's that idea, right? It's just people talking about rumors that seem almost to be public common knowledge at this point, and they're getting their tongues cut out and arrested. It's not a good precedent that you're setting. Cersei recounts that one of the preachers claimed the gods were punishing them because Jaime murdered King Aerys. Again, it just goes into Jaime's kind of persona, the way people view him, because he broke his oath. They don't really think about why Jaime would have killed Aerys and what his rationale was behind that, because people don't care. Think about even modern day. Think about rumors that come out about big celebrities. A lot of the news media, they don't even care if these claims are true about people. They will just spread them. And because this is where a lot of people are getting their information, they'll almost believe that without even checking any other sources. It's the same way that we see in our media now, where there's a lot of confirmation bias. If you believe something, or you're, leaning one way, whether it's political, whether it's other things, our social media and our news, a lot, not like cable news or things like that, but like your news you're getting on your cell phone or things like that, are going to be dictated towards that, because you're going to be confirming your bias that is right. You're not going to see other sides of it. And that's something I think that is kind of happening here as well, right? Where people are just blindly kind of going on to the rumors that follow without ever actually validating if those are correct. Now, it's much harder to do it in this kind of a society because you don't have cell phones. You can't go on your phone and look up, okay, is this, actually true, or whatnot, right? Here, it's a lot of word of mouth. It's what you're being fed by the royal family. It's just a lot of propaganda and all that stuff. She complains that Tyrion and Sir Jacqueline Bywater failed to act, so she ordered Vylar to deal with the preachers. Now, the interesting part here is, you think about Vylar, we have this idea that Tyrion kind of had this understanding with Vylar that not only is he loyal to Cersei, but he also should be loyal to him because they're both Lannisters. This is going to become an issue, because if Vylar was put in a situation where he had to choose between the two, who does he back, right? And Tyrion's going to recognize that, right? Like, Vylar's men can be useful and used, but at the same time, he doesn't necessarily need them in King's Landing at this point, while he's trying to take all the power away from Cersei so that he can basically completely act on his own. Tyrion acknowledges that Vylar carried out the orders, but considers the issue too minor to contest. There's much more bigger pressing matters at this point, to let Cersei just have whatever she's doing. Again, he's trying to make her feel in a good mood, and so criticizing her actions kind of go counter against that. He tells Cersei that his visit concerns more pressing matters and requests privacy. Cersei dismisses the musicians and bids Lancel to leave after kissing him on the cheek. Now, if you're Tyrion, what I think is going to be really interesting here, and why I think Tyrion, puts a lot of the things together here, is, one, why is Lancel here with Cersei late, into the night? And two, she just kissed him on the cheek as he's leaving. I guarantee you Tyrion has never been kissed on the cheek by his sister in his entire life. So right away, just some very suspect things as to why is Lancel so close to Cersei. Lancel leaves reluctantly, slamming the door behind him. Cersei then accuses Tyrion of being overly pleased with himself and demands an explanation. Tyrion thinks of the progress on his secret chain being forged in the Street of Steel. He hops onto Robert's old canopied bed and expresses surprise that Cersei actually kept it. Cersei sarcastically claims it gives her sweet dreams and demands Tyrion state his business. Now, I think this is interesting, right? Because in a lot of ways, Cersei is keeping, Robert's bed almost as a trophy, saying that I won. I won this victory over Robert. I finally got rid of him. All of those things, albeit it was really the boar that killed Robert. She helped it, right? Of course, but it wasn't all on her. She got a lot of luck. Like I talked about this with Game of Thrones all the way through. For her to actually have won in book 1 against Ned required a lot of luck and good timing. Ned had pretty much all the cards on his side of things right up to the moment that Robert died. As soon as Robert died, then things went, bad. If Robert had lived even a couple days longer, Cersei would be dead right now. So, you got to give Cersei her credit. She knew to get rid of Robert, but you also got to put into effect that she got very lucky as well. Tyrion begins to tell her what he really wanted to tell her. Tyrion reveals that Stannis Baratheon has sailed from Dragonstone. Cersei jumps up in alarm, immediately wondering, what are we doing? Why is Tyrion not acting serious about this? If Stannis has left Dragonstone, that means he's coming to attack King's Landing. But that's not the truth. Tyrion begins laughing uncontrollably, confused and frustrating Cersei. She grabs him by the shoulders, shaking him and demanding an explanation. Now, it's also even more interesting if you're Cersei. Why does Tyrion know all this information before she does? It just kind of shows you, like, Tyrion is only leaking information out to Cersei that he wants her to know and when she wants to learn it. That's the interesting part here that Cersei's not even thinking about here. Like, this is something so major. Why hasn't Varys told her about it? Why is she learning about it from Tyrion? We find out that Stannis has not actually sailed against them, but instead has laid siege to Storm's End, prompting Renly to ride to confront him. Now, this is going to get us into page 301, but here's what I will say. This is a good thing in terms of it buys Tyrion and Cersei some time here, but I also want to point out, like, this doesn't really matter all that much. I mean, all it is just delaying the inevitable. Whoever wins between Stannis and Renly, they're going to attack King's Landing. It's buying you time, yes. It's giving you, a couple weeks, maybe a month of time to try and build up, right? Build up your defenses and also give time for Tywin to try and deal with Robb. It buys you time because you don't know that Robb is going into the West, that your army in the West also can then trap Robb. It's buying you more time and allowing for a situation in which the Starks are dealt with and the Lannisters then can come and support King's Landing, or Tywin specifically. Now, they also don't have the background information as to why Stannis would go to Storm's End. Because right now Stannis just does not have the men to try and siege King's Landing. And even if he won, he doesn't have enough men to hold the actual city. So, in a lot of ways, Stannis makes the right play. Stannis' only play at this point, if he's not going to ally with Robb, is he's going to have to assassinate Renly somehow and gain Renly's support. There's really only 3 options that Stannis has at this point. One of them is to ally with Robb Stark. That's one idea. The second idea is you're going to have to assassinate Renly to gain his men. Or the third idea is that you go, parlay with Renly and hope he joins you and becomes your heir. That's realistically the only choices Stannis has, outside of just straight up bending the knee, which we know he wouldn't do, or just doing nothing, which we also know he wouldn't do. So Stannis is in a tough position, and the Lannisters don't necessarily know that because he's kept his position, his strength, so secretive. Cersei digs her nails into Tyrion's arms and stares at him in disbelief. She struggles to process the news before confirming that Stannis and Renly are fighting. When Tyrion nods, Cersei begins to chuckle and jokingly suggests Robert might have been the clever one. I will say this. Renly makes this situation much, much worse. If Renly had backed Stannis, the war is over. If Stannis himself had made an alliance with Robb and had gotten Renly to back him, the war is over, right? The only thing that's allowing the Lannisters to even have a chance in this war is just because of how divided the actual kingdoms are. Tyrion roars with laughter, and for a moment, they share genuine amusement. Remember, this is a big moment, right? This is Cersei realizing that they at least are going to be able to live or not have to go into battle for a good amount of time. This is something that would have been at the front of both of their minds, and realizing this could be the last few, days of their lives. And now what they've, again, The fear of the unknown, I would say, is much stronger than the fear of knowing what's happening, right? This whole time, since the end of book one, or even again, latter phases of book one, nobody's known what Stannis is doing, how strong he is. You don't know. He could have 10,000 sellswords or a ton of boats and all this stuff. The Lannisters just don't know. And so the fact that, now this is finally revealed, they know what, Stannis is doing and it's not against them, is got to be a very relieving moment. And Tyrion, kind of for a moment, right? He feels like he and his sister are actually siblings, that she doesn't just hate him with all her guts. It's this genuine moment that isn't necessarily because Cersei likes Tyrion, it's because of how good the news is. And that's again something that's going to hurt Tyrion more when he realizes that. Cersei pulls Tyrion off the bed, spinning him around, and even hugs him in a rare display of joy. The moment leaves Tyrion breathless and dizzy, forcing him to steady himself against the sideboard. Cersei asks whether Stannis and Renly might reconcile, but Tyrion dismisses the possibility, noting they are too different yet too similar, and neither could tolerate the other. Tyrion's completely correct. There is no hope for either one of these backing down to the other. If this was a different situation and maybe Renly didn't have the support that he had, maybe that's a different story. If Renly hadn't already married the Tyrells and he didn't have them whispering in his ear, this could have gone a lot differently. But unfortunately, Tyrion has the right of it. They are polar opposites and they don't even really like each other as brothers. They don't really have much of a relationship. And Stannis himself resents Renly because he got Storm's End, something that Stannis always felt was his. Cersei recalls Stannis' long-standing resentment over Robert giving Storm's End to Renly. She remembers how Stannis frequently complained about it and clenched his jaw so tightly she feared his teeth would shatter. Tyrion acknowledges that Stannis saw it as a slight, and Cersei confirms that it was intended as one. I will say this. I've talked about this. I made a YouTube short. It's one of my most viewed YouTube shorts on this channel, but I've talked about this in the past, and I don't think that Robert giving Stannis Dragonstone was a slight. I think that there was a lack of communication here that kind of clarified why Robert gave Dragonstone to Stannis. Because the problem is, if you think about it, who is going to get Dragonstone when the Targaryens are gone? And it makes the most sense for Stannis to get it. Well, one, because Stannis this time was Robert's heir. And the other part of that is, if you're thinking about this from a Targaryen restoration idea, what Robert quite literally thinks about a lot in book one, it's a lot of the main plot is Daenerys is being married into the Dothraki and all that stuff. The first place they're going to land is Dragonstone. You need a man that A, you can trust, two, that's a great military commander, and three, someone that can live in Dragonstone. Dragonstone is not a forgiving place. You have to be somebody that's willing to adapt to the situation. All of those things Stannis is perfect for. But with that being said, if you're Robert and you don't explain those things to Stannis, Stannis is going to view it as, you just disinherited me from my home. What does Dragonstone have? It's a very depressing place. It's a place I don't want to be at. I want to live at my home. And you can really sympathize with Stannis in this idea, and you can just tell, based on all the turmoil we've seen between Robert and his brothers, this is something that the two just never discussed, at least in a private and transparent manner. And so I think that's something that really is a big reason as to why the War of the Five Kings goes down the way it does. Tyrion proposes a toast to brotherly love, which Cersei enthusiastically accepts, which is interesting given that Cersei sleeps with one of her brothers, and the other one is lusting after her, but also Cersei treats him like just terribly. So it's just a very ironic toast coming from Tyrion and Cersei. As he fills their cups with Arbor Red, he discreetly poisons Cersei's wine. This is just another reason, an indicator. Like, if you think about when you get to Joffrey's, death, one of the big things you look at is like Tyrion has now experience with poisoning people. Yes, doesn't kill Cersei, of course, but it's already there. Like the drawing is right there on the wall. Tyrion briefly wonders if this joyful, laughing Cersei is the one Jaime sees and reflects once again on her beauty. Tyrion is jealous of Jaime and of being able to be with his sister, which is absolutely crazy. A line from the song resurfaces in his mind. I love the maid as fair as summer, with sunlight in her hair. Kind of a double-edged meaning here, thinking about Tysha, but you could also think about Cersei and her, golden hair and all of that stuff. He almost feels guilty for poisoning her, but it had to be done. The next morning, a messenger informs Tyrion that the queen is indisposed and unable to leave her chambers. He assumes she is suffering from severe digestive distress due to the poison. It isn't a poison that's like it's going to kill her or anything like that. It's just something that's meant to knock her out, and let Tyrion do what he needs to do, as he's going to try and strip her of her last remaining defenders. Making the appropriate sympathetic remarks, he sends word for Cersei to rest, assuring her that he will handle a meeting with Sir Cleos as planned. And that'll get us into page 302. So, a lot of things are important to understand here. At the very beginning of the chapter, we saw that Vylar is going against Tyrion's wishes and is following Cersei's orders. That's something that Tyrion's going to view as a threat. But the other part of this is interesting is Tyrion is going to be able to dictate the terms being sent back to Robb Stark as well. Instantly, we go to the throne room in page 302 as Tyrion describes the Iron Throne as dangerous, uncomfortable, and sharp with sharp edges and barbs. Tyrion struggles with the steps due to his short legs, but he appreciates the throne's height. You can see why this power corrupts so many, because you're in this seat that's above everybody else. It makes you feel like you're more superior. And that's what the Targaryens intended in a lot of ways, right? Because in the early days of the Targaryen dynasty, and this still was kind of a thing, but it was not as big of a thing later on in the Targaryen rule. But when the Targaryens had their dragons, especially you think about kings like Maegor, who was prompted by Visenya, he viewed himself as being like above them. He was a Targaryen, and that's the way a lot of the common folk believe the Targaryens to be, that they were not normal men. They were above that, some kind of like half god type figures, right? And so that's kind of the purpose of the Iron Throne, to give the Iron Throne weight and stature, to give the person sitting on it power. That's the reason in a lot of ways when during a lot of these wars, you never want to abandon the Iron Throne, because it's that seat of legitimacy. And that's something that, for instance, again, a House of the Dragon spoiler, Aegon II kind of loses in that war because he has to flee, and so Rhaenyra gets it. So for a while, her legitimacy goes up, even though she doesn't do so well in King's Landing. That's kind of the point of it. Even if you want to think about the beginning of the war, Aegon II gets a lot of legitimacy because he's the one on the throne while Rhaenyra is at Dragonstone. Lannister guards in crimson cloaks and gold cloaks under Sir Jacqueline stand on opposite sides of the hall. Bronn and Sir Preston of the Kingsguard flank the throne's steps. The gallery is filled with courtiers while supplicants gather near the great doors. Sansa Stark looks lovely but pale. Lord Giles is coughing, and Tyrek Lannister wears his bridegroom's mantle. Tyrion enjoys looking down at everyone from the throne and hearing his voice ring in the hall. This is something Tyrion has not experienced much at all in his entire life, and he's kind of reveling in it, right? He is the person with the most power right now, and everyone else, he now gets to look down on them instead of the other way around. He regrets that Shay could not witness his triumphant moment, but Sir Cleos Frey enters, walking straight ahead without looking around. As he kneels, Tyrion notices that Cleos is losing hair. Don't blame him, probably because of stress and a lot of those things that he's traveling through the most war-torn areas, and he's also basically a prisoner of war. So it's not been a nice life for Cleos, and things unfortunately don't end all that well for him. Littlefinger then acknowledges Cleos' efforts in bringing Robb Stark's peace offer, and Grand Maester Pycelle announces that the Queen Regent, the Hand, and the Small Council have obviously rejected the offer. Tyrion states the counteroffer. Robb must surrender, swear fealty, release Jaime, and place his forces under Lannister command. Each of Robb's bannermen must send a hostage to King's Landing, a son if possible, a daughter if not. The hostages will be treated well unless their fathers commit further treason. And Cleos even knows that Robb's not going to accept these terms, but that isn't the point, right? It's to delay. It's for Robb to send another proposal back to them and then just keep going back and forth until you would assume maybe they would get to better terms. Right now, this would never happen. Robb would never give up his whole army, swear fealty to the Lannisters, let somebody that he just freed in Jaime take control of his army. Makes no sense, right? Especially when you look at it from this point of view. The Starks are right now in a fairly decent position. Yes, the Lannisters are gathering more men against him and all those things, but the Lannisters at the same time are likely going to lose the throne if he can just stall the Lannisters for a little bit longer, right? If Robb can just keep Tywin focused on the West and on him, King's Landing is going to fall in a matter of at least like the next month, right? That's all that matters if you're Rob. So of course this is never going to work, and I think Tyrion realizes that, and everybody really realizes that, but it's just stall for time. Tyrion insists that he deliver the message nonetheless, but he also says to warn Robb that another Lannister army is forming at Casterly Rock. He adds that Tywin Lannister is advancing from the east, leaving Robb without allies. He reveals that Stannis and Renly are at war, and that Dorne has agreed to marry Prince Trystane to Myrcella. Now, this news is going to get a really big mixed reaction. One thing, you're going to be sitting here going, okay, if you're in the court, you're like, whoa, okay, Stannis is not coming to siege the city. That's good. That's good news, right? But in the same vein, Tyrion kind of sprinkles in some news that he knows is quite mixed. Cersei's second child, and Myrcella, is going to be married to a Dornishman. Yes, the Dornishmen are a bit more accepted than they were during the days of, say, the first Blackfire Rebellion, or even, further back than that. But it's still not a great look. People in Westeros still very much discriminate against the Dornish, and having the Dornish marry into the crown, not a great look to a lot of people. They wouldn't look at that and be really happy about that. As we get into page 303, Tyrion offers Harrison Karstark and Sir Wylis Manderly in exchange for Willem Lannister, and Lord Cerwyn and Sir Donnell Locke for Tion Lannister. He jokes that 2 Lannisters are worth 4 Northmen, earning laughter from the court. It's an interesting parallel given the fact that basically the Northmen say the complete opposite, right? That every one of their Northmen are worth like 10 Lannisters or 10 Southern swords. Also, it goes a little further if you think about it. Like, the way the lords just, these are soldiers fighting for them, and they use them as just numbers, right? He then agrees to return Eddard Stark's bones as a gesture of good faith from Joffrey. Sir Cleos reminds Tyrion that Robb had also asked for his sister and his father's sword. Sir Ilyn Payne is present with Eddard Stark's greatsword Ice, but Tyrion refuses to return Ice until Robb makes peace with the Lannisters. He states that Sansa and Arya will remain as hostages until Jaime is released unharmed. He really badly needs Bywater to find Arya, because right now they just have Sansa. And anyone with 2 brain cells knows Robb is not going to trade Sansa for Jaime. And so it's kind of one of those things where, again, it's a lot of posturing by Tyrion. Cleos agrees to deliver the message. Tyrion orders Sir Vylar to escort Cleos back to Riverrun with all the Lannister guardsmen stationed in the city. This is a bold move from Tyrion, because you're stripping a lot of valuable swords to defending the city just to bring these peace terms back to Riverrun. Grand Maester Pycelle, ever the Cersei crony, reminds Tyrion that Tywin sent the men to protect Cersei and her children. Tyrion dismisses the concern, saying the Kingsguard and City Watch are sufficient enough. Varys smiles knowingly, and Littlefinger feigns boredom, but Pycelle is shocked and speechless because they're all realizing what Tyrion's doing. He's taking the last remaining loyal swords to Cersei and sending them away. But there's a little bit more to it that Tyrion has yet to reveal. A herald asks if anyone else wishes to bring matters before the king's hand, and Sir Alys Thorne steps forward, pushing past the Redwyne twins, noting to Thorne that he had not been informed of his presence. Thorne, a stern and bitter man, complains that he has been ignored and made to wait like a common servant. Now, Tyrion obviously knew he was here. We'd actually seen this in a past chapter of Tyrion treating Thorne a certain way. But if you're Tyrion, why treat Alliser Thorne well? Alliser Thorne has done the exact opposite to Tyrion. Tyrion does not like Alliser Thorne whatsoever because he treats Jon pretty badly. So Tyrion's not going to allow Alliser Thorne to, just strut around, right? He's going to put him a bit more into his place. Tyrion sarcastically chastises Bronn for mistreating Sir Alliser, calling him an old friend from the Wall. Varys tries to pacify Thorne, suggesting that many seek Joffrey's favor in troubled times. Littlefinger even jokes, because he always jokes and doesn't take things seriously, that they call Varys Lord Eunuch to his face. Pycelle asks in a soothing tone how they may assist Alliser Thorne. Thorne states that the Lord Commander sent him directly to the king because the matter's too grave for servants. Thorne is not somebody, in my opinion, that is a very good politician. Like, yes, I know you're pissed off because of the way you've been treated and you've been pushed to the side, but calling them servants and basically dismissing them when they have all of the power and the king is basically a child or a very young teenager, not a good move. It's not the way people are going to, hear out your claims and things like that. Tyrion dismisses this, saying Joffrey is playing with his new crossbow, forcing Thorne to speak to them instead. Thorne reports that 2 long missing rangers were found dead, but later rose again. We're basically just referencing the stuff we got in the last book with Jon when the Whites came back and all of that stuff. That they killed Sir Jeremy Riker and the other attempted to murder Jeor Mormont. Somebody in the hall kind of begins to laugh at this, making Tyrion uneasy as he wonders if this is a trick meant to mock him. Right away, if you're Tyrion, somebody that doesn't really know anything about this, who's dismissed it even to Jon publicly about these things north of the wall, this is a really tough subject because for Tyrion, if you're sitting here going, well, I know Jeor Mormont's a very trustworthy person, somebody that would tell the truth, but at the same time, the court is going to laugh at me if I like actually think this is true. So what Tyrion does is really smart. It's also going to make him enemies, of course, but it's very smart. He's going to downplay this threat while also giving Alistair Thorne some support. He's going to give him his pick of getting more men and things like that, but he can't just take this seriously in front of the entire court. He recalls his time at the wall with Jon Snow, the eerie feeling of the cold northern darkness and a howling wolf that had unnerved him. He brushes off his unease but acknowledges a liking for Jeor Mormont. Tyrion confirms that Mormont survived the attack and asks if the undead men were truly killed this time. Thorne affirms that they were. Tyrion senses the court's amusement, mockingly asks if they are truly, truly dead. Bronn snorts with laughter, signaling to Tyrion that the court is treating the matter as a joke. So, again, Tyrion, even inside of his head, might wonder about this threat and maybe even might believe it a little bit, right? Maybe take a little bit more seriously. Because this is happening in a public space, he has to really feign any type of interest in this idea and play it for laughs. Getting to page 305, Sir Alistair is frustrated, insists that the dead men were already cold and blackened when found. He claims to have brought a severed hand as proof, but it rotted away while he waited to be heard. Another issue, and I talked about this in book 1, is it's nice and all trying to bring proof of the Whites, but it's a hand. Again, it's going to decompose. People are just going to dismiss it as you just cut off somebody's arm or hand or whatever. It was never really that great of proof to have to begin with. Littlefinger mockingly asks where the hand is, prompting laughter from the court. Tyrion sarcastically orders Littlefinger to buy Sir Alistair 100 spades to take back to the wall, and Sir Alistair is confused, asking about the spades. Tyrion quips that burying the dead will prevent them from walking, making the court laugh even more. But this is where Tyrion gives Thorne something of value. He gives him men, right? He's been playing this whole thing as a joke, but he does actually buy into this and gives Thorne some men. And Thorne's not even going to realize that. He orders Sir Jacqueline Bywater to allow Thorne to recruit from the city dungeons. Bywater notes that the cells are nearly empty because only a little while ago you had Yoren already take out the people from the dungeons, so you can't necessarily do that. But Tyrion gives him another suggestion. He says to either arrest more criminals or spread word that the Watch has food, expecting desperate men to volunteer. We saw this with Yoren's company, right? If you give people food, they will likely try and join, because right now people are starving to death. The court session ends here, but Alistair remains furious at being mocked, and he feels like he wasn't taken seriously. Tyrion dismissively tells him to kill them more. He blocks Tyrion's way, insisting that the dead are truly walking. Tyrion dismissively tells him to kill them more thoroughly. Sir Alistair tries to grab Tyrion's sleeve, but Sir Preston Greenfield intervenes. Thorne calls Tyrion a fool, but Tyrion turns it back on him, pointing out that the court was laughing at him, not Tyrion. He reminds Thorne that he came seeking men, which Tyrion has provided, before threatening to use a crab fork on him again. Remember, referencing the moment where Tyrion was kind of taunting him back when he was up at the wall. Tyrion bids him farewell, sarcastically sending regards to Mormont and Jon Snow, which is also going to make Alistair quite pissed off because Alistair does not like Jon Snow. And it's something that I think will also be held against Jon, right? All these people that like Jon Snow, but they hate Alistair, and Alistair's treated quite badly in this situation, albeit Alistair gets what he wants. He's going to get more men. Bronn forcibly removes Sir Alistair from the hall. That'll get us into page 306, but again, I want to talk about how masterfully Tyrion plays this. Tyrion cannot take what Thorne is doing seriously, but he still finds a way to give Thorne what he wants, albeit Thorne still being very angry. And it's one of those, weird situations where Tyrion makes a lot of enemies in this book, and he's going to make a lot of enemies in the next book, which is why most people easily condemn him for Joffrey's murder. It's things like this. Even though Tyrion plays this really tactfully, it comes off as kind of cruel. It kind of comes off as very mocking. Having the court laugh at this guy. In a book from now, those people will turn on him. And I think that's very interesting. Varys praises Tyrion for his cunning, noting how Tyrion appeased the Stark boy, removed his sister's protectors, and dealt with the Black Brother, making it appear as if he doesn't fear threats. Tyrion responds that he's only sending away his sister's guards, not all his own. Again, he's very smart about this. Tyrion has his own following of protectors, right? He believes he has the gold cloaks with Bywater, and he also has the mountain clans that he got in book 1. So as of right now, he's in a really good position. Littlefinger questions this, though. How is this plan going to happen? The queen's not going to allow Tyrion to just send away all of her guards, but Tyrion has thought of that too. Tyrion is going to use these men for something else. But Littlefinger takes the chance now to mention the other lie, as Tyrion had lied to Littlefinger about his intentions of marrying Myrcella to Robin Arryn. As if Myrcella is marrying Trystane, Myrcella can't then marry Robin Arryn, and Littlefinger feels slighted by this, something that's definitely going to play out in book 3. Littlefinger does not like being played, and this is something that I think will turn Littlefinger against Tyrion, especially when you see the idea that Tyrion marries Sansa. A lot of motivation for Littlefinger to want Tyrion gone. That's why a lot of people speculate at the idea that maybe Tyrion was the real target at the Purple Wedding, because there is motivation there. But that's a whole different topic. I have a video on that if you want to check that out on my main channel, the Grease Goblins, not the reread part. But yeah, Littlefinger, unhappy about being lied to, tells Tyrion to keep him out of future deceptions, and Tyrion promises to be more considerate, but hoping that Littlefinger does not involve him in any of his. Tyrion reflects on the situation and hints at his own plan involving Varys, suggesting that the queen will allow the guard change and Varys will help with it. Tyrion actually plans to do a ruse, because he had gotten 4 criminals to be disguised as guards. These men, their sole purpose was to get Jaime out of Riverrun. But he can't just send these random 4 guys with Cleos, because then they're going to be looked at, right? They're not going to be let out of their sight. But if he sends a whole regiment of men, they can easily get lost. And that's what Tyrion's whole plan is, and that's why Cersei's going to allow it, because it's trying to free Jaime, the person Cersei cares about a lot. Or because more, I would say it's because of a reflection of herself. She sees herself in Jaime. That'll get us into page 307. Tyrion discusses with Varys how the queen will consent to the plan for the loss of her red cloaks despite her unease, and Tyrion admits he likes seeing her uneasy. Again, it puts Cersei more out of her comfort zone. It gives Tyrion leverage. Sir Cleos Frey then leaves with the Lannister guards and the men that had been sent by Robb Stark for a journey to go back to Riverrun. But at this, Tyrion meets Timett and instructs him to meet in his solar at midnight. Tyrion then kind of talks with Timett and Shagga that evening, and as they're feasting and stuff, and joking to Shagga about the sharpness of his axe, and Shagga recounts a very gruesome story. By midnight, the castle is quiet, and Tyrion, along with Timett and Shagga, sneak out unnoticed. They break into a room where a woman is sleeping, causing her to panic. Tyrion tells her to leave as they are not after her, but Shagga expresses a very keen interest in her. Timett remarks that Shagga deserves every woman in King's Landing. It's going to be very eye-opening, though, if you're one of these mountain clansmen where, again, you're living in the mountain clans, you don't see that many women that are like, I would say, like very attractive or, are actually clean and things like that. And so when you come to basically the city of brothels, more or less, it's got to be an eye-opening experience for someone, like Shagga. But getting into page 308, Shagga drops one of the funniest lines, in my opinion. I mean, we get 2 of the funniest lines of the book in this chapter. And one of these lines I quote, not daily, but like I quote it a good amount of times. But we get Shagga expressing his desire to have a child with the serving girl. And he says that he can give her a strong child. Tyrion dismisses this right away, but he expresses that if the girl wants a strong child, she knows where to find Shagga. He then asks Timett to escort her out gently, which he doesn't really do. He drags the girl out of the room as Shagga watches with longing. Tyrion reveals Grand Maester Pycelle, who is hidden under the blanket and accuses him of betraying him by sending a letter to Tyrion's sister instead of Doran Martell. And Tyrion knows this to be correct, right? The only person that Tyrion told about the Myrcella Trystane marriage was him. Varys himself kind of knew that Tyrion was trying to make an alliance with someone, but he didn't have the exact details, so you can't blame it on Varys. Pycelle denies it, blaming Varys, but Tyrion points out that only he knew about the letter he entrusted to Pycelle. Pycelle tries to make excuses, mentioning Varys and Littlefinger, but Tyrion is unimpressed. Tyrion knows that Pycelle is lying to him. He knows that Pycelle is an ally and an informer to Cersei. Now, here's the interesting part about Pycelle. Pycelle is a great tool for the Lannisters in a lot of ways, but just not to Tyrion. And that's what Tyrion's doing. Tyrion's trying to isolate any power or any influence that Cersei has. And Pycelle, unfortunately, went with Cersei over Tyrion. Tyrion orders Shagga to castrate Pycelle, but there are no goats available. Tyrion drops his famous line, "We'll make do." I don't know why I love the way that line is delivered by Peter Dinklage in the show. I just quote that line a lot in situations like this, and it's just one of my favorite lines. Shagga cuts off most of Pycelle's beard, while Pycelle screams in fear and wets the bed. Pycelle is not the bravest of men, but I guess I would not be as brave either with a big dude like Shagga up in my face and also having a weapon to my throat. So I guess I can't blame him too much, but it's not a good look for Pycelle. Tyrion sarcastically asks Timett if Pycelle will be more forthcoming without his beard to hide behind. And it's interesting because you also think about the idea that Pycelle, the role he plays, is this old, grand maester, but he's really a corrupt man. He was literally having sex with a prostitute at the very beginning of this whole encounter. Pycelle is not only, somebody that informs on everyone to Cersei, but he also is a liar. He hides behind this weak state that people underestimate him. Timett senses Pycelle's fear and predicts he will soon tell the truth. Shagga cuts off the remaining part of Pycelle's beard, with Tyrion warning Pycelle to hold still as Shagga's hands can shake when angry. Shagga denies this. His hands never shake is what he says. Tyrion presses Pycelle on how long he has been spying for Tyrion's sister. Pycelle defends himself, claiming he has always served House Lannister faithfully, and reveals that he had a role in the sack of King's Landing. Now, I will say, this is a massive reveal for the book. Up to this point, we didn't necessarily know what went down at the sack of King's Landing. We know from the book so far up to this point that, okay, yeah, Tywin had come, Jaime had killed Aerys, they sacked the city. We didn't know what was the domino that allowed that to happen. Was it just Aerys, believing that Tywin was coming to their aid, and so Aerys is to blame? But here, we realize that that's not the case. It was Pycelle all along, and that Pycelle has been more of a House Lannister guy, and specifically a big Tywin guy from his time as Hand of the King. This is really important to understand, because for Tyrion, you're sitting here going, okay, yeah, Pycelle is loyal to the Lannisters, but not loyal to the right Lannisters, as Tyrion needs men he can trust, and he can't trust Pycelle, unfortunately. Pycelle explains that when Rhaegar died, Aerys was mad and Viserys was too young, and he believed Robert was too strong. He had hoped Lord Tywin would take the throne, but Robert and Stark moved too quickly. Tyrion challenges Pycelle on how many people he has betrayed, mentioning Aerys, Eddard, himself, Robert, Lord Arryn, and Prince Rhaegar. And that's the truth. Regardless of the way you want to look at it, even though we can maybe see this as Tyrion kind of bullying Pycelle to a degree and all that stuff, Pycelle has betrayed every person that he's been under, outside of Tywin. And when you think about that, and there's a lot of reasons that the Grand Maester conspiracy is such a fun, conspiracy, a lot of it is like this. How many corrupt maesters are there that maybe are under an ideology that can shape the kingdoms? You think about everything that Pycelle's done, how his actions have directly influenced the way that the world has gone. That's a lot of the reasons why a lot of people love the Grand Maester conspiracy, myself included. Pycelle begins to speak about Robert's wounds, but Tyrion already knows that the boar was what ended Robert's life. Pycelle admits that he would have finished the job if it was left incomplete. This is a weird thing for Pycelle to say. Tyrion right now just said he does not want to hear that you betrayed people. right? Because it shows you're untrustworthy. The whole point of this is you yourself, Pycelle, are somebody that Tyrion cannot trust because you care more about Cersei than you do Tyrion. Pycelle also nods to an idea that we got in book 1 through Ned, is that Renly was planning to entice Robert with Marjorie. He was trying to get Marjorie to supplant Cersei. Again, it just ties the idea that the Tyrells were already trying to get on the throne, and claims that Robert was a terrible king, which, yes, Robert was not a good king, but Pycelle was going to let him die? That goes directly against his order. It goes against everything a maester is supposed to be. Tyrion presses Pycelle about Lord Aaron's actions, with Pycelle revealing that Lord Aaron knew something and was planning to act, including sending his wife back to the Eyrie and his son to Dragonstone. By the way, this confirms the kind of plot line with Catelyn in the first book, with the idea that Catelyn was under this illusion that Robert Aaron was being sent to be fostered with Tywin, when in reality Lord Aaron wanted that to be with Stannis. But Tyrion then concludes that Pycelle then poisoned Lord Aaron. Now, it's not a bad guess. It's kind of the same idea that Ned comes to. Ned kind of comes to realize it's probably between Pycelle and Cersei that killed Lord Aaron. We, as an audience, know that this is not the case. But if you're anybody in this situation, this is the most accurate guess you could have. Pycelle is somebody that's loyal to Cersei. Cersei would have wanted Jon Arryn dead. Pycelle has access to poisons, and even as a reader, right? If you're a reader at this point, remember, the opening to this chapter is a maester trying to poison someone. A lot of parallels there. And so when we eventually do get to book 3 and we get the big reveal of who actually killed Jon Arryn, this is one of those things where it's George is putting this in here because likely this is what readers probably would have believed happened at that point. But that gets us to the last page, page 310. Pycelle denies his involvement in poisoning Lord Aaron, but Tyrion points out the presence of the Tears of Lys among his potions, and the fact that he sent away Lord Aaron's own maester to ensure his death. Again, Jon Arryn did die in a lot of reasons, not because of just the poison, but because of the health care that he received afterwards, in which Pycelle was not helping, right? He was actively choosing to let Jon Arryn die. Shaga is told to shave Pycelle closer, and the axe cuts Pycelle's throat a bit, causing him to tremble and admit his involvement. Pycelle confesses that he did not give Lord Aaron the poison, but he knew the queen needed him dead and suspected it was the Squire Hugh who poisoned him. So this is another important point. Pycelle now has no reason to hide if he poisoned Jon Arryn. So even though we're being led to believe it is Pycelle, this is important because if you're sitting here and you're reading that and you're realizing, okay, wait, Pycelle is being held at, okay, this is life or death, and he's still not confessing to killing Jon Arryn, but yet he's confessing to all these other things that he's done. Who actually did kill Jon Arryn? Now we're led to believe maybe Hugh did it, right? There's just so many things here that point to, okay, we don't have this full picture yet, but we will. Tyrion orders Pycelle to be bound and thrown into a black cell, and Pycelle, still pleading, is dragged away, crying that all he did was for Lannister. After Pycelle is taken away, Tyrion searches his quarters and collects small jars from his shelves. He reflects on how Varys and Littlefinger are as untrustworthy as Pycelle, just more subtle, which is the truth. Varys and Littlefinger hide it. They make it harder for you to pin something on them, or they make themselves more valuable. Pycelle just is not all that good at that game. Tyrion considers his father's more direct approach. Maybe he should just kill all of them now and be done with it. But at this point, Varys has a lot of sway right now with Tyrion, and Tyrion's not even sure if he could even kill Littlefinger because he doesn't know how much influence Littlefinger truly has. But that will get us to the end of the chapter. I love this chapter. It's a really well-paced chapter. It is a chapter that has really funny moments, big foreshadowing moments to the future of the series. This moment here with Pycelle is something that's going to come to bite Tyrion in the butt later on. Because Tyrion, doesn't kill Pycelle, haven't executed any of those things, just hasn't put in the black cells. Eventually Pycelle is going to be, kind of restored and all that stuff. This is something that's going to come back to bite him. And you understand why Tyrion does it. And I don't even think it necessarily is a bad move because you can't predict what's going to happen with Tyrion. You can't predict that he's the person that's going to be set for the murder of, Joffrey when he obviously didn't do it. It's that idea right then and there that is kind of a struggle, is that Tyrion makes so many enemies in this book that really come back to bite him in A Storm of Swords. It's why so many people love A Storm of Swords, because it has all the big payoff moments of that really book 1 and 2 are setting up. You know, we've talked about Tysha with Tyrion. We've talked about the people he slighted or he will slight. You know, people like Lancel, you know, like Pycelle, maybe even the common folk and the way that they view him right now, the handling of the situation, things he's going to do in the future with making threats towards, you know, Tommen, for instance, and sending Myrcella off to Dorne. All those things kind of come back to bite Tyrion later on. But as of right now, Tyrion is playing this game quite masterfully. But thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye, guys.